I think I can share my screen now.
Yes.
Let me know if it's visible.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So, hi everyone. My name is Rawnaq Al Ismaili from Oman. I'll be presenting Cinema Rusail, which is a project I personally worked on as a designer and executor, project manager. But this project was mainly brought to life by two main entities, which is Zawraq Collective and a production company called عمق Films. Okay. So we're going to start off with the cinema narrative and context. It was established in 1989 as part of the National Day celebrations. It was commissioned by the Ministry of Commerce. It's an outdoor open-to-air cinema. It was mainly built as a means of entertainment for expats. So the cinema itself is situated in a industrial area where there's accommodations for like expats and workers. And in 1989, there were no satellite dishes, so there was no TV. So the government would or the ministry would host weekly films or shows for the expats living in that area. It was used until the year 2000 because that's when satellite dishes were introduced. So there was no need for the building function anymore. And then it was abandoned until 2023. So for 23 years, it was abandoned and then demolished, unfortunately, in 2024. In 2023, we got news that it was going to be demolished, and we got in contact with the investor and developer. So they're taking up the whole area around Cinema Rusail to build like this commercial development, typical. But we asked if we could create one last outdoor cinema experience. This is to create like value to the public because the area the cinema was situated in is an industrial area. It's very far from like locals from where people usually live. So it wasn't very known. There was no value to it. That's why it was like prone to be demolished. There was no social value, economic value, nothing. So we created this as a safeguarding framework. We decided to create an activation to the space by creating like maybe a social value. Although it was demolished, people still would see that these buildings maybe are not maybe these buildings are worth something. They're not supposed to be demolished, or we could change the narrative that's mostly about the modern heritage in Oman through these activations, through creating non-existent values. You can see what 23 years of abandonment has done to the place. So we had 3 weeks to work on this. It was mainly used as like storage. Sometimes trash would be thrown out of the perimeter of the building, but they did not want that the trash would be visible, so they would keep it inside, although because no one was using it. They even built like this concrete wall for a company that owns the land to store their electronic goods. We had exactly 3 weeks to design, execute, and activate the whole space, gutting out 23 years of like wall residue. If we found like beehives built into the walls itself. So we were designing on the go. We had like notebooks that we were just sketching out. As you can see here, we were just sketching out how this room would look, and then we would like send the guy we would see to buy the appliances for it. Some areas we did need to create like a quick 3D for it. It was mainly designed with like the 80s theme in mind. Since the cinema was built in that era, we wanted to reflect like the details of that era within the building. These are some design details that we had. This is the shabak, which is the box office located outside. We did charge people for tickets. This was the screening area on the inside. You can see the existing concrete in situ seatings. This was the concrete wall I was talking about that they built to store like their electronic goods. We purposely kept it exposed. We did not paint it or do anything to it. We just added like this phrase: "We cannot forget the past or ignore it. Here we return and the cinema returns once again. لا يمكن نسيان الماضي أو تجاهله. هنا نعود وتعود سينما رسائل." And then we had the date of when it was functional, and then till now يعني. Again, we did this on a very tight budget, 3 weeks. Anyone who worked in the design industry knows how challenging it is to design and execute something within 3 weeks, especially if it was abandoned. We wanted to integrate the local businesses. So this was an ice cream shop that was serving popcorn, even the roasted peanuts that were usually like distributed along the streets and neighborhoods here in Oman. This is more of a detail of it. The cinema inside had like separate rooms. So we had the Bayt al-Raha, which was the powder room, and the studio. This was the reception and corridor. So we basically ordered posters, vintage posters, all the way from Lebanon, and we were very, very lucky that it had arrived on time, just to give people the look and feel of it. This was the reception area. You could see it sort of reflects that 80s vibe. This was Dukkan al-Cinema, which is the gift shop. Yeah, I'd like to conclude with 2 videos that we worked on. One was a teaser, and then the other one is like a timeline. So Asia, can you let me know if you can hear the audio?
Sorry.
Can you hear the audio of the music of the video?
Can you play it again? Oh, is it playing? Yeah, it's playing, but it's a little bit unclear.
Ready?
ننقل لكم اليوم أول خبر
Okay, clear.
افتتاح سينما روسيل.
Can you hear it?
لأول مرة أخذكم في جولة زميلي مسطح. أعزائي المشاهدين، كما ترون نحن الآن أمام سينما الروسيل
We can hear the audio, but there is no video opening. Is it just an audio?
Oh, okay. Just a second. I think I'm not sharing. You see it now?
Yes.
Okay.
ننقل لكم اليوم أول خبر بافتتاح سينما الروسيل لأول مرة. أخذكم في جولة زميلي مصبح.
أعزائي المشاهدين، كما ترون نحن الآن أمام سينما الروسيل، وهنا سوف تباع التذاكر. لنأخذ جولة أخرى حول صالة الروسيل. صالة الروسيل مملية بالمفاجآت الكبيرة. انظروا هنا وهنا وهنا، وعندئذ سيكون هنا معنا آيس كريم هفسة، آيس كريم فنان غاوي. هنا ترون دار السينما. دار السينما كبير وواسع وجميل. هنا جميع الأفلام الأكشن والكوميدية والأفلام الرومانسية. في الختام أعزائي، لا يسعنا إلا أن نقول لكم أن تأتوا لحضور افتتاح سينما الروسيل. لمن يبحث عن المتعة والفرجة سوف يجدها في سينما الروسيل. شكرا.
So this was just a teaser created by the production company. And this was the basically process. Within 3 weeks, you could see the timeline of how we worked.
يا شعب الصحراء دوني يا شعب الصحراء دوني بارد الصحراء يا الصحراء بارد الصحراء ترمال الصحراء شعب الصحراء اليوم سجل شعب الصحراء اليوم سجل عبد حرب التحرير حكم وفي حرب التحرير
Okay. Thank you guys for
Thank you so much, Rawnaq.
watching.
That was really very beautiful. We really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for sharing your meaningful experience with us.
No worries. Let me know if you have any questions.
So the title of our talk is Tactile Cinema, Reflections on Community Experience. So our kind of engagement with cinema started off with the competition to design a cinema space at Hay Jamil, an Arts and Community Center in Jeddah. The competition was launched shortly after a 3-decade ban on cinema was lifted in Saudi, and this was the first independent art house cinema project in the city. And we're also going to tackle different ideas about cinema as a cultural institution, cinema as a space, and also cinema as a form of cultural expression in the context of Saudi, especially given its peculiar history with the ban.
We then kind of moved on to design. Through this process, we worked on a smaller scale with Eric Chen in Lisbon on a project called Tactile Cinema, where we explored different postures that we're going to later talk to you about. So the project on the left. So we're kind of going to unfold this whole presentation through the lens of 2 different scales of projects of cinema, which will kind of guide you through our thinking process and how we perceive our research of cinema that goes through just our thinking process in our practice, and how us and our team kind of look through identities of architecture, research of architecture, and how the intersection of architecture and cinema kind of, I guess, go hand in hand on how we perceive the history of the city. Kind of becomes an analogy for how we can dissect these different narratives in a way. So these 2 projects will kind of tell you bits and pieces of how we can kind of tell the story of the tactility of cinema, and how we kind of looked at something that's so intangible as a film becomes tangible as much as it is of an architecture. I hope that kind of makes sense through how we can go through this presentation, and then how it kind of can hinge on cultural aspects in a way.
So cinema in Jeddah is actually it's part of a longer tradition that was based on communities. So there was a well-established tradition called the Cinema al-Hosh. So families from different neighborhoods would come together, and they would import reels from mostly from Egypt and different parts of the Arab world, and they would sometimes it would just be a family gathering, and sometimes it would be a larger gathering where people would pay a small fee. And it was really a community space.
In their backyard. That's what Al-Hosh means, really.
And yeah, also in parallel, the image on the left shows a screening at one of the delegations in one of the traditional houses in the old city of Jeddah. On the right is an image from a garden cinema, a cinema Al-Hosh gathering, and it really is a cultural institution, and people come together to see film and understand understand film as a form of cultural expression. In the 50s and 60s, cinema was becoming more formalized with the establishment of Saudi TV. There was apparently there were 3 cinemas in Jeddah, according to a survey that was completed in the late 50s. And then you have production houses like Jamjoom Video, which was a very well-established cinema in the 60s and 70s. The cinema ban happens later on after the siege of Mecca in the late 70s, and all of cinema spaces are closed in the 1980s, 90s, and the 2000s. So, so for us, when we were working on designing a new cinema, it was a question of how do we revive the cinema as a legitimate form of cultural expression in the context of Jeddah, and how do we establish that through the architecture of the place.
And then when the competition was floated, it was actually supposed to be one of the first cinemas that was going to open in Saudi, which was quite interesting. So it really did probe the question of how do we kind of investigate this very question. How do we research this? How do we start to understand not only the social fabric, but how do we even kind of create a space for it that probes these questions? How do we create spaces for people to research it within a cultural space as that kind of goes hand in hand with what Art Jamil wants to create within their wider high space, their High Jamil space, which is a space for artists, researchers, this kind of multi-space. So I'll let you go on, Turki.
So before we go into the cinema at Hay, we'll show you a spin-off project, a temporary installation we completed for the Museum of Art, Architecture and Technology in Lisbon, curated by Eric Chen, as Abdulrahman mentioned earlier. And in this small installation, we were exploring the different phases cinema went through in the Saudi context, and in Jeddah in particular. So the installation was composed of 3 different parts and 3 different screens. One of them was the home cinema, and that was communicated through the idea of a private space. This was the status of cinema in the 3 decades of the ban. People were viewing films in their homes, and what we designed was a closed space with a formal seating posture, because a lot of people were building actual cinema spaces with cinema seats inside their homes to replicate, to make up for the lack of cinemas in public. Cinema, and we also explored the informal posture of cinema Al-Hosh in one of these screens, and you can see a person lies down, they're looking at a screen at almost a bit upwards, and this kind of contributes to the informal setup of the cinema Al-Hosh. And then the last one is an open forum kind of where people where the screen is outside of the installation and people are watching the cinema in the middle of the exhibition space. And so and so this is the final installation. So each pod kind of represents a different moment in time about the status of cinema in Jeddah. The installation was accompanied by a film program curated by Rosen Topani from the Art Jamil team. And it kind of explores this this notion of bringing this history of cinema into this installation.
We covered the cinema in carpet to kind of simulate this this tactile sense of static sense. So whenever you touch the cinema, you get almost this sense of, you know, when you touch carpet, you kind of get this sense of electricity. So you get this electric sense. So it reminds you of the static sense of the TV. So we wanted to translate that very materiality. So almost subconsciously, you get reminded of that as whenever you get up and you touch something in the hopes of getting that sense.
So really, we were exploring this question of, is cinema a form of cultural expression, or is it just entertainment and part of a wider consumerist culture?
And I think in that sense, we also work in different ways. We worked on a book through different initiatives that we named Raw Print. We worked on a book on the intersection of architecture and film, which the editor-in-chief is Jawahir Al-Sideri, along with Mish Studio and a bunch of other writers. The book is called Scripted Spaces. So it looked at different films from different parts of the world. And it kind of dissects these films and talks about these films on how architecture becomes either as a narrative tool or as a brand or as a frame. And we kind of look at these things from architecture or as a written format. When we kind of look at film usually starts with a script. So it's really something that you read, or is it something that you watch? Do you inhabit the space? How do you kind of do all of these things? And even in our practice as architects, a space is something that you inhabit, light filters through it. It's always something that you kind of go through. So it's something you experience as a person. You enter the space, you kind of inhabit the space in so many different ways. This is one of the images that we submitted during the development stages after we won the competition for high cinema. But I think it really expresses a lot of how people can inhabit these spaces. I think for us, it's kind of, how do you capture this sense? How do you kind of get people to really have this sense of interplay of light and space, whether it be through film or of how natural light filters through the space as well.
So I think, so this was our, this diagram sums up our proposal for high cinema, the initial one. And what we proposed was that we don't have one big cinema space as per the competition requirements. We proposed that we'd have 3 different cinema spaces, a film archive and a film library. One of them would be an informal cinema, the one on the right, which is something where people have more freedom to, have different postures and have different types of furniture to watch films. Another one is an outdoor, indoor, but part of the lobby of the Hayy Jamil building, which can have continuous screenings, where people, we imagine that people who are filmmakers would would show some of their drafts of films. And then we also have an archive that can be a reference for filmmakers in Jeddah, and a library as well. So we were really thinking about, going back to this question of cinema as a form of cultural expression, and how do we reinstate that after the 30-year ban. So the different components of the project that we proposed for Hay are really to establish this institution, and also allow the public to interact with professionals from the film industry in a way.
And these are just images from the film. I think we're kind of going over time, and that's kind of, we wanted to create these different atmospheres for the visitor to engage with. And that's, I think, for us, it goes through these different threads of research. Is how do you kind of go from different formats, whether readable, whether experiential? How do you kind of go from light to dark? How do you experience things? And I think what we want to end with is, as a person, you're always the spectator. You always perceive things in different ways with your different perspective. It always ends with a perspective, with a point of research. It's a never-ending process, I think, and there's always a narrative that's unfolding. And for us, that's what's always interesting, and it's what keeps our process interesting. I don't know if you want to add anything, Turki.
No, I think, this image always kind of came up while we were doing our research. It's the cover of Guy Debord's Society of the Spectacle. And, I think that our kind of interest in cinema is really coming as a reaction to how we're witnessing cinema become, a very, how people are consuming cinema in the context of Saudi, and really trying to push the boundaries of really reconsidering film as a legitimate form of cultural expression within the context of Jeddah.
Thank you.